because that was important for my income. And what I personally go through with the kid has my older son, the younger son has autism. So basically has a lot of 24 hours attention. He's a good kid, he's actually working right now and he actually kind of contribute to the society too. But the thing is he needs has a kind of 20 hours supervision. He calling like 10 times a day from her cell phone to tell us, oh, I'm out there, it's rainy. Is that okay, it's raining? So kind of this kind of situation he is. But I'm very proud of him because he did a great job. My wife through the breast cancer situation last year, and it was very difficult for me. And I see so much support from my co-workers over there. They are so nice, and everybody, even I didn't know them, they come to me and give me a hug and tell me what's going on. And this kind of things give you a kind of sense of belonging. You're belonging to the place that you want to grow up, basically. But unfortunately, the situation is right. Now, I don't see any kind of the light in the end of the tunnel. Mark could actually talk better than every of us and put everything in the right perspective, and I think that he materialized what we are going to say and what we are thinking. And the only thing is, as I said, the Ikea culture is not that very respected. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Koros? Sure. If I know that you made the distinction, you wanted to speak for yourself and not for everyone, but if we were to if someone from Ikea were in the room today, how would you address them regarding this situation? And from speaking from your heart, from your experience.
Yes. What is happening, even was inside the store, as Mark put it in best way actually, regarding the disconnection between the management, top management, and the co-workers over there. What I said, you have to make your act right to expecting us to make us right. Because I've been there for 3 years, and during these 3 years, how many management in a high level came and go? Never has a time to build the store. That's what I told them all the time. I'm working in a return department. I see all kinds of flaws every day. And when they come, it's kind of funny for me, when they come to the last offer, they said, the store is not underperforming, and we want the store to make a better performance. Based on performance, we're going to pay you on your wages increase. But said, it's something that is not under my control. How do you expect me to say yes to this one? Because I know every day that the product is not having the quality that has supposed to have, because we see a lot of stuff. We have a problem with our food serve department that is very small. We don't have enough space to put the stuff in there, so they have to build another part again to make it bigger to be able to do that. We see so much customers sitting there for 2 hours, get distraught, and after 2 hours say, sorry, we don't have that, it's oversold. How can I control that? That's something that I'm not expecting that they want me to do. That's the management job. If it's something wrong with the store management, they should go to the higher level and fix the thing. But as long as we do our job, we're expecting that we want to disrespect us for what we are doing. Yeah. Thank you.
Now I'm turning to Lindsay, the lawyer here. We have heard a number of speakers here today, and can you put what we have heard into the context of labor law and labor history in DC?
Well, I'll try to do that, Peter. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Commission. I'd also like to thank the BC Federation of Labor very much for inviting me to be present here today and to participate. I have listened with great interest to the stories that we've heard, especially the stories that we've heard from you, the workers at Ikea, who have been locked out these 6 long months. For those of us who aren't from British Columbia, it may be a little bit hard to understand some of the political structure here in this province. we have something that is pleased to call itself a liberal government in BC. That's a capital L liberal government that would bear no resemblance to anything that someone in Sweden or Britain might think of as a small L liberal government. We've had that government for quite a long time now, and boy, the timing of your lockout is interesting, isn't it? It was just the same time as we had a provincial election here in British Columbia, when I'm sure many people in this room were quite hopeful that we were going to have a different government than what we have today. That said, I agree with what Jim Sinclair from the BC Federation of Labour had to say, that what we've heard about today, what you've experienced firsthand within your relationship with your employer is, I think, a lot more to do with Ikea than it is to do with provincial politics here in the province of BC. We have a labor relations code which, in some respects, one important respect which your union has used to significant advantage in your labor dispute, it does provide workers with some significant labor rights. And what I'm referring to there is the replacement worker provision that Jim Sinclair referred to. So what Ikea has done in this dispute is push the envelope, and in fact, in some respects, torn up the envelope of conventional, lawful labor relations under the British Columbia Labor Relations Code. What they've done is, and the Labor Relations Board of BC has found this to be the case, is they have on a number of occasions quite systematically brought in replacement workers contrary to the provisions of the Labor Relations Code. In the most significant decision from the board on that point, the board found that the breaches of the replacement worker provisions of the code are far-reaching, extending to virtually all corners of the work site. And because of that, what the Labor Board in that decision did was they said, we're going to appoint an industrial relations officer, a civil servant, whose job it is going to be to go in and see what is going on behind the barricades, behind the doors which are closed to you folks as workers who are locked out, and to see what's going on. And that was because, as the board said, of the expansive and far-reaching breaches of the unfair labor practice provisions of the Labor Relations Code. Now, unfortunately, the board, on reconsideration of that decision, an appeal of that decision, upheld the unfair labor practices which the board had found had been occurred by bringing in these replacement workers, but overturned the board's decision in terms of bringing in that industrial relations officer to investigate what was going on. I think that's really unfortunate, because your union, the Teamsters, has done yeoman's service in trying to figure out what's going on behind those doors that are closed to you, in bringing in a private detective to take videotape so that they could prove what was going on with replacement workers in the workplace. Those replacement workers have included your fellow employees who have crossed the picket line, sadly. Who were hired subsequent to the notice to bargain being given. They have included security workers. They have included managers brought in from out of province. They have included cleaning contractors being brought in to work longer hours than they worked prior to the lockout. In all of those ways, the board has found that your employer has breached the Labor Relations Code and has committed an unfair labor practice. There's other ways, I think, on what I've heard today, that your employer has sadly been really pushing the envelope of lawful conduct under our Labor Relations Code. I've been particularly struck by what we lawyers like to call captive audience meetings. What I'm talking about there are the stories that several of you have told, where managers have brought you in either in small groups or one-on-one sessions to sell you on the collective agreement that your employer has sought to impose upon you. Now, sadly, under our Labor Relations Code, that may well be lawful. But boy, it's pushing the envelope of lawful behavior. Similarly, when Anita Dawson, your business representative, spoke about some of the provisions which the employer has sought to have the union agree to, which of course the union hasn't agreed to, I was struck by how she talked about how much more difficult it has become for the union to obtain access to the workplace, even for casual conversation, just to check in. And I was particularly struck by the collective agreement provision which the employer sought to have the union agree to. Very glad to hear that they've now backed off of it, whereby a worker could not at one and the same time be both a shop steward and a supervisor. Our labor relations code prohibits employers from an employer or a person acting on behalf of an employer must not participate in or interfere with the formation, selection, or administration of a trade union or contribute financial or other support. What else did we hear about today? We heard about the employer offering to pay the legal expenses, I think I heard, of those employees who would cross the picket line and who would then face charges under your union constitution. My word, that is playing very, very close to the line of Section 6 of the Labor Relations Code. So, those are just some of the things that I've heard this afternoon. Some of them I knew about before because they are a matter of record in a decision of the BC Labor Relations Board in terms of the breaches, the systemic breaches, the far-reaching breaches of the replacement worker provisions of the code. For some things I've learned about today for the first time having to do with what is coming very close to, I would say, interference in the administration of your trade union. Very concerning, but I want to commend all of those of you who are here today and all of those who have been sitting on that picket line, walking on that picket line. Oh, just one more point. You might be interested to know that your employer, in seeking to justify its use of the replacement workers, said that not only had they not locked you out, there was no strike. And so therefore, there was no Section 68 of the Labor Relations Code, which is the provision that prohibits the use of replacement workers, didn't even apply. You may be surprised to know that your employer actually argued before the Labor Relations Board, no strike, no lockout. Fortunately, the Labor Relations Board had very little difficulty in saying, boy, walks like a duck and talks like a duck. I think there's a labor dispute going on here. I think the replacement worker provisions of the code apply. But I commend you for the solidarity that you've shown. Thank you.
Have any questions, please? Okay. Actually, we only have one point left on the agenda. That's the closing comments. And we have decided, well, I have decided, since my mind is not in a good shape today, I have mixed up the countries, the cities, the names. So I have decided that the closing comments will be done by Michael and Eric, and we start with Michael.
Thanks very much. I also want to start actually by thanking all of you for coming today and for taking part, and especially those who got up and shared their testimony. That was very, very informative. It was. It's obviously going to shape this report that we will ultimately do, and it's definitely going to have an impact somewhere along the line of. I think someone used the metaphor the other day. We drop a rock in a puddle and there's ripples, and so sometimes we don't know where these, how many of these ripples they're going to be and how long it's going to be, but this is one of those ripples, and you're all part of it. So I just wanted to basically summarize where we've been as delegates here over the last couple of days, who we've spoken with, and things like that. Yesterday morning we met with the Teamsters Local 213 at their office. We met with a number of officers, the business agent, and as well as the bargaining committee, which was absolutely an outstanding opportunity for us to get to the details of what's on the table. Sometimes things become convoluted in bargaining, and I would say, in my experience, all the time things become convoluted in the bargaining process. It was very important to to draw out what are these key issues. And so to have that opportunity to hear from the technical end what's on the table and what are the real key issues was really important for the Commission. As well as the legal details and the legal things that have gone on, which Lindsay just so eloquently elaborated for us. From there, we went to the picket line, and I would like to say that from my perspective, was one of the most enlightening components of this. It was when we got to speak to the actual people on the picket line and get on the ground, was where I think we started to connect with what this dispute actually means for people and for their families and for their lives. One story that really sticks out was, there's people on that picket line that, have young children that, are ill, suffering from illness, this sort of the impact is actually immeasurable when you talk about not being allowed to work. I mean, the company has said that sure you could come back to work, but under a substandard arrangement, something that is kind of outside the idea of collective bargaining. If you're saying, yeah, well, you're locked out, but you can come back to work if you want, but under these substandard conditions, right? But the main point was that there are people who are suffering out there, but I didn't, and this has been a almost 6 month long dispute, but I really didn't get a sense that people were in any way negative about it. They weren't. There wasn't what you would kind of expect from that kind of situation. People were sticking together. People saw the reasons. People understood why they were doing what they were doing, and every single person that we spoke to was absolutely knowledgeable about the issues and about how this dispute and these issues have impacted them. And it wasn't just impacting workers now, and I think that's where it brings this whole issue into a broader context. We're also talking about the future of commercial and retail industry in Canada and in the world. These are ongoing sort of trends, and we've seen it in the non-union retail sector, in Walmart and things, just this race to the bottom. And I think that what's going on here in Richmond is another one of those many examples of what's standing in the way of things getting really, really bad for working people. And so I think what's going on out there is incredibly important, and I was really touched and moved to be able to speak to people who are actually living it. Today, we heard from a broad range of views as well, and obviously this is going to be very important. My understanding is that it's all recorded, so while we were taking diligent notes, I know we didn't catch everything, but we will be reviewing all that stuff, rest assured. But I just wanted to end, and before passing it over to Aaron, and just make the statement that, some people might be wondering, well, what is the point of this? What is the job of the Commission? And really what it is, it's very basic, it's very simple. It's to open those spaces where we can engage the stakeholders, and yes, we invited the employer to meet with us, and yes, they said they did not want to meet with us prior to coming here. But I think most importantly is to open the spaces for those voices to come out, and for that stuff, for those voices to be heard in a broader context. And that's basically, to put a fine point on it, I think that's the point. Thanks.
Yeah, it's been a very informative 2 days, passionate at times, emotional, but also we've got to learn a lot about what's going on here in Richmond and with Ikea. I get the sense from the older employees, not older in age, older in tenure, that they're feeling a real sense of loss at the moment with this company that they once treasured, held quite close to their hearts, and I'm feeling from them a kind of sense of betrayal almost. For the new employees, I'm feeling much more of a frustrated expectation that's not been met by something they walked into thinking was one thing and actually has turned out to be something very different. Our job as a commission is to ask the questions: are IKEA being serious? Are their claims plausible around this dispute? What does this mean, this particular dispute mean for industrial relations here in BC, but not just in BC, across the globe? I find it very difficult to talk about my job and attach it to tangible things, but at moments of crisis like this, it all becomes very clear what my job and what my role should be at the international level. If the union here is broken, it will send out a signal both here and to the rest of the world, including throughout the IKEA network of stores. It will give another indication to the big global companies that they can trample on workers' rights, that they can dilute their commitments to social dialogue with worker representatives, and thereby further squeeze the living standards and benefits of ordinary working people. The determination, the courage, the sacrifice of many of the workers we have heard from today, and we met on the picket line yesterday, is a real inspiration to us all, and to workers everywhere who are struggling against selfish corporate interests. Our task now is to examine this evidence further, to write our report, to take our findings back to the international labour movement, back to Sweden. But we hope IKEA will change course. We hope it will go back to the negotiation table with the workforce with no preconditions. We hope it does this in good faith and in line with the IKEA values that were outlined so passionately by Mark earlier today. That was really powerful. The materials IKEA puts out on its philosophy and culture, it's explicit about the rights of workers to organise. Implicit in this right is to acknowledge that workers will sometimes have a different perspective and different ideas. These differences need to be managed in dialogue. The term co-worker must have meaning. Alternatively, the dispute goes on, under the gaze now of a wider international labour movement, which is looking very closely at this dispute. The labour movement has affiliates and workers in different IKEA stores and throughout its supply chain, many of whom I'm sure would be proud to stand up in solidarity with those courageous men and women we met on the picket line today and heard from today too. To get this message out to a wider audience. So thank you today for your participation. I hope in some small way that this international focus on this dispute will haste a resolution, and a resolution that satisfies those, particularly those we've heard from today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael and Mary. I just want to finish up with saying I really would like to emphasize we take this really seriously. We will make a serious report, and we will communicate the report to both ITF and to the Global Union, and we'll take it from there. And if you can resolve the problem here in Richmond by yourself or nationally, I'm sure we will be there for you in one way or another. I also would like to thank all the speakers here today and all the other participants who have taken your time to come here to listen to this public hearing, and hopefully we'll have an end of this lockout before Christmas, hopefully as soon as possible, but before Christmas. Thank you so very much for all of you.
Okay. warm in here, isn't it?